Welcome back to part 2 of the story of She Cheated with a Gym Rat She Just Met. And if you recall, in the first video, it was a story of a guy, Dan, who was age 29, and his girlfriend, Meg, age 23. They had been together over 10 months. Things were going great. They were madly in love. They both had good jobs. He's in IT. He's been moving up the ladder. She had just started a job for a large company in their marketing department. They were talking about marriage. They were talking about having children. And then lo and behold, she goes off and has an affair with a guy she met at her gym. And where we left off was Dan found out about this, confronted her. She lied at first. Then she came clean. And now in part 2, we're going to see how Dan handled the situation. And at the end of the video, we're going to talk about, some of the lessons learned here and some of the key takeaways. So let's get right into it. So after hearing all the gory details, I told her, "You had the affair and we are done." I then told her that I want you to leave my apartment and I never want to see you again as long as I live. Very strong statement there, but it's the appropriate one. Whenever someone cheats, whether it's a woman cheating on a man cheating on a woman, the trust is forever broken and it could never be repaired. In my opinion, there is no saving a relationship like that. You need to cut bait and move on with your life. If you don't, then that person who cheated on you is going to control your mind for the rest of your life. And that's something that no one wants to live with or should have to live with. She began crying hysterically, dropped to her knees, clutching my ankles and begging me for mercy. I said again to her, "Meg, it's over." I then jerked my feet from her clutches and she got up and ran into the bathroom crying. I then called her father, who I have a terrific relationship with, and asked if her mother was nearby. He said she was, and I asked that he put me on speakerphone as I had something important to tell them. They both were excited, thinking I was going to tell them something special, like I was going to ask Meg to marry me. Boy, they're going to be in for a shock here. Instead, I first told them Meg is fine and is right here with me at home, but I have some terrible news to share. So that was good that he told them up front, "Hey, she's fine, but I've got some terrible news to share." Because if he had said I have some terrible news to share, they may have thought, "Hey, something serious has happened to her." Their voices fell silent. I then said Meg cheated on me last Friday and our relationship is over. They both said, "What?" Followed by, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry this happened to you, Dan." Her father said, "Dan, you didn't deserve this. I am embarrassed and truly sorry." Her mother then said, "Dan, we love you like a son. You know that." I reciprocated by telling them both that I loved them like my second parents, and I started to cry. After composing myself, I told them Meg was in the bathroom crying hysterically and I needed them to stop by to comfort her and take her back to their home. They said they will be right over and promptly arrived about 25 minutes later. Upon arrival, they both hugged me tightly again, saying how sorry they were for what their daughter had done. Meg heard them and came out of the bathroom sobbing and said, "Mom and Dad, I'm so sorry. I'm broken. I've betrayed Dan and ruined our lives." With that, her mother began sobbing and clutched her daughter as they both wept uncontrollably. As the ladies were crying, her father walked over to me, and this is a really poignant part here. Her father walked over to me and put his arm on my shoulder, stating, "Son, please do what is best for you. We will accept and respect whatever you decide to do." Obviously, her father is a very strong man and he knows that a betrayal like this is irreparable. So he, went to Dan here and said, "Listen, you do what you have to do for you." And I think if Dan were to take her back, potentially her father would think less of Dan, because he knows a strong man would never be able to accept that. So Dan thanked him, gave him a hug, and with that he walked over to Meg and her mother and said, "Let's go home." So the father walked over to the ladies as they were crying and said, "Let's go home." Before leaving, Meg turned to me sobbing and said, "Dan, I know you don't want to hear this now and you will not believe me, but I love you and will always love you. I'm sorry for what I've done and will do anything, absolutely anything to make it up to you if you just give me a chance."
Don't do it, Dan.
"Don't do it." I said, "Meg, we are done. I can never trust you again and could never get the thought of you and the other man out of my mind. That movie will be playing in his. If he were to take her back, that movie of him or her and that other guy would be playing in his mind constantly. So therefore she would be controlling his mind, both of them, The affair partner and his girlfriend would be controlling his mind from that day forward, and you can't live like that. So what he's saying here is truly factual. I need to move on with my life without you. Hearing this, she collapsed on the floor sobbing, and with that her father and mother put their arms around her, lifting her up and walking her out the door to their car. I spent the rest of the night in a shell-shocked daze, crying and going from feelings of extreme anger and betrayal to a terrible dark sadness that actually made me nauseous. I didn't sleep a wink that night, which is completely understandable. The next morning I called the landlord and had him change the locks on our apartment doors, blocked her phone number, boxed up all of her personal belongings, and had a courier service take them to her parents' home, which is about 12 miles from my apartment. I'm sure that was difficult, but that was absolutely the right thing to do. I have not seen or heard from Meg or her parents since that fateful night. However, about a year after our breakup, I ran into a friend of Meg's who said that Meg had what amounted to a nervous breakdown shortly after our split. She said Meg took a leave of absence from her job and rarely leaves the house. She went on to say she looks totally different now, and you wouldn't believe she is the same person. She said Meg has gained over 35 pounds, cut her hair short, dyed it black, dresses in black, and has gotten 2 tattoos above her knees. She described the tattoo above her right knee as a black shield with the word sinner on it, and the tattoo on her other knee as a depiction of Meg surrounded by the flames of hell. So, obviously this girl has some mental problems and she's now resorting to disfiguring herself, gaining all this weight, putting these heinous tattoos on herself, cutting her hair real short, dyeing it black, wearing black. She's obviously got some real mental problems going on. According to her friend, she got the tattoos as a constant reminder that she is a terrible person who had it all and threw it all away for nothing. She said Meg is deeply depressed, is in therapy, and is taking multiple prescription medications. She said she has told her family and friends that her plan is to just exist for the rest of her life in a sort of self-mandated purgatory for what she has done. So obviously again this girl has some real mental problems going on, and it's good that she's in therapy and working with counselors and so forth, and hopefully she can come out of this because she obviously has some real problems. Hearing this made me feel terrible. While Meg cheated, caused our breakup, and destroyed part of my soul, I feel extreme sadness, which I can understand that you would feel sorry for her condition there, and some guilt. Now you shouldn't be feeling any guilt in a situation like this because you did absolutely nothing wrong. You handled this situation very well, so don't be feeling guilty about this. And hearing that someone I cared for so much is now suffering so much, I understand the sadness, because you don't want to see somebody just totally flame out like this. But he shouldn't be feeling any guilt because again, he didn't do anything wrong in this situation. I thought about contacting Meg. That's a big mistake. Big mistake? And you'll see he doesn't do it, to see if talking to me might make her feel better about herself and snap out of her depression. But I decided against it as doing so may drive her even deeper into the depression as I could never love or trust her again. Absolutely right. She's in therapy now, hopefully she is, getting over you slowly. They haven't been in touch with you, so obviously, she and her family are trying to move her along. If you were to come back in her life and then, explain to her, hey, there's no chance for us to get together. I'm just coming back to see if I can console you and lift your spirits, that might set her over the edge. So he did the absolute correct thing here in not reaching out. Instead, I've been praying for Meg and her wonderful parents every night, hoping that God guides them through these dark times and that Meg can rebound, learn from this experience, and live a happy, healthy life. She deserves that. As for me, since our breakup, I have gotten a promotion and I am happily dating a great girl. We really care about each other and are very compatible, but I am taking things very slow and measured based on my experience with Meg. I am a traditional guy and still hope to one day get married and have a big family, but if that happens, it will happen in due time. Thank you for reading my story and for your valuable feedback. I wanted to share this so that others can learn from this life-changing experience, which, absolutely, that was a life-changing experience and there are a lot of good learnings from this, and let's take a look at what some of those are here in summary. The first one here that I have listed: some women can't live without getting attention and validation from multiple men. Really, that's the majority of women, probably close to all women. Like that attention and validation. However, I think the majority of women don't act out on those things, especially to the degree that Meg did here. I have listed here and some even resort to sex to get it, just like Meg did in this situation. Now, do all women do that? No, but there is a subset, and it's a much larger subset, I think, than most of us realize that will go to those extremes in order to get that attention and validation. Next point, women can immediately cheat after meeting a random guy at any time, at any place. Now, if you're in a relationship with someone, you should have absolute trust in them and they should have trust in you. You shouldn't have to be worried about, oh, I got to think about where she's going at all times. Oh, if she goes to get her oil changed, maybe she's going to hit it off with the guy who changes her oil. Or if the cable guy comes over to fix our cable, maybe she's going to hit it off with him. Or if she goes through the Starbucks drive-thru and the barista catches her attention, she might be hitting it off with him. You shouldn't have to live like that. You shouldn't have to live like that. But the point I'm making here, if someone is predisposed to cheating, they can squeeze in these trysts at any time. They can make time. They will make time for these trysts. So it's just something you have to keep in mind. But the moral of the story here is you should be in a relationship, if you are in a relationship, with someone you have absolute trust for, and they should have absolute trust for you. The next point, women don't always cheat for hypergamous reasons. In fact, they often cheat down. Now, in this case, I think there was some hypergamy going on here, but I'll explain that. But she obviously cheated down from a career standpoint. Dan had a very robust career going, and her affair partner was unemployed. So in terms of income, in terms of job status, definitely she cheated down. However, she may have cheated hypergamously with this affair partner based on his looks, his physique. Because in this story, Dan didn't explain what his body was like, or what the affair partner's body was like, or what their looks were like. So there could have been some, hypergamous reasons here because obviously she was physically attracted to this other guy. Women generally react emotionally. Biggest difference between men and women, I think, one of the biggest differences, without thinking rationally or about the consequences, where men typically react more pragmatically. Meaning, let me think about this, let me think about the repercussions before I make this decision. Now, does that always happen? No, it doesn't always happen. But women, most of the time, react on emotions. And that's exactly what this Meg did in this case. She saw this guy, she was attracted to him, but instead of thinking, hey, wait a minute, I love this guy, Dan, we're living together, we love each other, we're in love, we're talking about getting married, having children, that's what I want. She wasn't thinking about any of those things. All she was thinking about was getting this guy, or getting the attention from this guy who approached her. And you see that after their lovemaking session ended, she immediately came to her senses and then started rationalizing things and then the gravity of it hit her. But again, that's a key difference between men and women. And the final point, and this one is critical, to make sure you protect your health. When women cheat, they often do so without protection. It's kind of a crime of passion, I call it. Exposing men to potential life-changing infections, diseases, third-party sperm, and becoming fathers to children for whom they are not the biological father. So they're not thinking again. They're reacting on emotion. They're not thinking about, hey, put on a condom or whatever to their affair partner. They're just going at it. And then oftentimes they feel guilty. So they'll rush home and then overcompensate with their husbands or boyfriends, by having unprotected sex with them, thinking that, hey, I gotta make up for what I just did, the sin I just did. And then that's completely exposing their boyfriends or husbands to STDs, STIs, to the sperm of the affair partner. It's just a totally disgusting situation. So guys, this is my public service announcement. Get used to wearing condoms. I think everybody should be wearing condoms every interaction that you have. And also using dental dams when you're performing oral sex on a woman. I think those are critical for protecting your health and also the health of your partner. Now, we're going to finish up here with, my thoughts. And these are my thoughts on how to handle situations like this. And I'm not criticizing this guy, Dan. I think he did a great job overall. He made some mistakes, like he rushed into the relationship with her and started living with her. But hey, I think overall he did a great job in this particular scenario. But again, I'm going to be giving you my thoughts on the situation. Everybody needs to make decisions based on what's best for them. I'm just giving you my opinion here. So number one, when your partner cheats, You must immediately end the relationship. There's no turning back. You can't repair it. It's done. It's over. Finito. Move on. If you were to stay, first of all, you're going to be the laughing stock of your community. Second, that movie of the affair partner and your girlfriend or wife is going to be playing in your mind constantly. So they're going to own your mind. You're going to be miserable. You're going to be thinking about, what's she doing now? Who's she thinking about? Is she thinking about me? Is she thinking about some other guy? You're not going to be able to trust her. So you got to cut that off immediately and do exactly what Dan did here. Handle the situation calmly, sternly, and never, ever employ violence. Never employ violence. The only person who's really going to be hurt by this long term is going to be you. You. Because what'll happen is potentially you could, the police could be called, you could be put in jail, you could get a felony conviction, you could lose your job, and you could ruin the rest of your life. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. They're not worth it. So if you do feel that rage, which you're going to feel rage against your girlfriend or your wife, or you're going to feel definitely rage, where you want to strike out. If you feel that, what you need to do is step away from the situation, get away from it, cool down, and then come back and address the situation. Never, ever, ever resort to violence. There's no point, and there's no place for violence unless it's for self-defense. Quickly engage and notify family members and close friends of the situation so that your ex does not have a chance to spin the story or create a false narrative. And that's one thing he did great here. What he did was he went out and he immediately, contacted her parents, and her parents came over and helped him, resolve the situation with her. And if he didn't do that, that whole situation at night might have turned out. It would have turned out much differently because I guarantee she wouldn't have left the apartment. She'd have been crying. She'd have been holding on to him. She'd have been screaming. And then since she was, grasping, she'd be grasping at straws. She may have manufactured some story, maybe called the police, said, "Hey, my boyfriend's here and he's trying to kick me out of his apartment," and then it could have turned out completely different. But he engaged her parents, and because of that, things went as well as could be expected in that particular case. Cut off all communication to resist any urge to reconnect for any reason. Very important. You're going to be tempted to contact them. You're going to be tempted to maybe go hook up with them. It's worst thing you can do. Don't have any additional contacts. Next, and I stressed this on the previous page, get comprehensive STD testing. Have a candid discussion with your partner up front about STDs and STIs and vaginal sperm survivability before entering an exclusive relationship. That's just my suggestion. You should have those discussions. Hey, we're going to get in this exclusive relationship. Let's talk about affairs. If there's any affairs, our relationship's over. We've got to talk about protecting each other from STIs and STDs, and you have that discussion up front so you lay the ground rules. I think that's very key. But protect yourself, protect your health. Require a DNA test before accepting responsibility for any child. This didn't happen in this case, thank goodness, but oftentimes it does. And you think that, in this case, Meg, if she had gotten pregnant from this guy, that she would have brought this up to her boyfriend? No. She would have told Dan, "Hey, we're pregnant." And he would have rushed out, married her. He'd raised this child, and then somewhere down the line, he would have found out the child's not his. And this kind of thing is happening too much these days. So always have a DNA test conducted. Never rush into marriage. Give it a minimum of 5+ years, including 2 years of living together. To make sure you get all the skeletons out of the closet and you really expose what this person's all about. Even then, though, the likelihood of failure is extremely high. We're talking now of divorce rates in the United States that are over 55%. Over 55%. That's on top of the marriage rate dropping below 50%. So you would think the marriage rate's going down, that the divorce rate should also be going down. Because the less people are getting married, you would think that, hey, those people who are getting married would be staying together. But that's not the case. So that's it for this video. I hope you found it valuable. Let me know what you think about it. Did Dan handle this appropriately? Is there anything you would have done differently? Have you had an experience like this where somebody, your significant other, cheated on you just with somebody she just met? And if you found this video valuable, please like and share it. We want to get the word out. You keep spreading the word and growing our community. And please subscribe to this channel. You can expect videos like this and other self-help type videos on a weekly basis. And I thank you for listening and watching today. And I'll talk the moment I saw that message light up my screen. Can't wait to see you again. My heart stopped. Mike was just in the next room, probably elbow deep in some engine part he'd brought home again, oblivious to the storm brewing in the living room. I lunged for my phone, my fingers fumbling to swipe away the evidence. Everything okay? Mike's voice cut through the silence, startling me as he stepped into the room, wiping grease off his hands with a rag. Yeah, just work stuff, I managed, my voice a notch too high. Client meeting got rescheduled. The lie tasted bitter on my tongue, but it slid out too easily. Mike nodded, unbothered, and went back to his mechanical world, leaving me to my own swirling thoughts. Our life had become this predictable pattern. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. I craved a spark, something to break the monotony, but I never imagined seeking it outside our marriage. Meeting Alex was like a breath of fresh air. He was vibrant, full of stories and laughter, so different from the routine life Mike and I had settled into. When Alex first complimented my designs over coffee, it was like someone finally saw me. Not just Emily, the wife, or Emily, the part-time graphic designer, but Emily, the person. The thrill of sneaking around with Alex was intoxicating at first. Our lunch breaks became our secret meetings, each one a step further away from my life with Mike. I convinced myself it was just a little excitement, nothing serious. But as the lies piled up, so did the guilt. The close call with the message was a wake-up call, a reminder of the double life I was leading. But instead of pulling back, I dove deeper, entangled in the web of my own lies. Telling Mike it was a work query felt like the easiest way out at the moment, but the weight of my deceit was getting harder to carry. As I sat there, watching Mike return to his work, a part of me wanted to shout the truth, to break free from the lies. But fear held me back. Fear of losing the comfort of our routine life, fear of the unknown, and fear of Mike's reaction. I realized then that the excitement I sought with Alex was just a fleeting escape from a deeper issue in our marriage. But by the time I understood this, it felt like I was too far gone, too deep into this affair that started as an innocent search for attention. The irony wasn't lost on me. In my quest to feel seen, I had become more invisible than ever, both to Mike and to myself. The moment I clicked "Create Account" on that new email service, I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was like stepping over a line I couldn't see but knew was there. This is just to keep things organized. I lied to myself, ignoring the gnawing guilt at the pit of my stomach. It was a lie, a big, fat, ugly one, and deep down, I knew it. But the thrill of sneaking around with Alex, the way he made me feel alive, was intoxicating. I convinced myself I was doing this to find happiness, something I felt was missing in my marriage with Mike. Alex's gift, a delicate silver bracelet, became my secret treasure, hidden away in the back of my sock drawer. I'd take it out, admiring its shine, feeling a mix of joy and guilt. Wearing it was my silent rebellion, a symbol of the attention and affection I craved so much. But it was also a tangible reminder of my deceit. Mike started to notice changes, small at first. "You seem different lately," he'd say, his brow furrowed in concern. "Is work stressing you out?" I'd brush off his concerns with a rehearsed, "Yeah, just a lot on my plate," while my heart raced with fear of being discovered. I became more cautious, paying for my secret outings with Alex in cash, thinking it would cover my tracks. Each lie, each sneaky maneuver, was a brick in the wall I was building between Mike and me, yet I was too lost in the thrill to see it. Then came the close call that sent my heart into my throat. Mike found a restaurant receipt in my purse, a pricey one that didn't match any client meeting I could have had. "Must have been a mix-up at the restaurant," I said, laughing it off, while my insides twisted into knots. But the real wake-up call was the day I forgot to log out of my secret email on the family iPad. I remembered in a cold panic late at night, rushing to the living room, only to find Mike already in bed. The next morning, the iPad lay untouched, but the air between us felt different, charged with an unspoken tension. Guilt started to eat at me, but I pushed it down, justifying my actions with the thought that my marriage to Mike had been on the rocks long before Alex came into the picture. I deserve happiness, I'd whisper to myself, trying to drown out the guilt with anger and blame. But with each secret meeting, each lie, that happiness felt more like a mirage, slipping further away the closer I tried to get. In my heart, I knew I was walking a dangerous path, one that could lead to the destruction of everything I held dear. Yet, the fear of losing the excitement and attention Alex gave me battled with my guilt and love for Mike, leaving me trapped in a web of my own making. The moment I realized Mike was growing suspicious, my world started to spin out of control. It wasn't just a nagging feeling anymore. It was an all-consuming dread that settled in the pit of my stomach, gnawing at me relentlessly. I could see it in the way he looked at me, a mix of confusion and suspicion shadowing his usually warm eyes. The casual checks on my phone and laptop, once innocent, now felt like the beginnings of an investigation. "I'm just checking something for work," Mike would say, but the tension in his voice was palpable, a stark contrast to the easygoing man I married. I knew something had shifted, but I was too wrapped up in the web of lies I had spun with Alex to fully grasp the extent of Mike's suspicion. Then came the day Mike found the secret email account. I didn't know it at the time, but leaving it logged in on the family iPad was the mistake that would unravel everything. Mike, ever the silent observer, started monitoring my communications with Alex. Every email, every plan, every word exchange was being documented, building a case I didn't even know existed. Mike's change in behavior was subtle but noticeable. He started spending more time with Tom, his best friend since high school, and I could only imagine the conversations they were having. "You should talk to her, man," I overheard Tom say one evening when I walked past the garage. Mike's silence was his answer, and the heavy air between them spoke volumes. Despite the mounting evidence, Mike chose not to confront me. Instead, he followed me one day, a shadow trailing behind unnoticed. From a distance, he watched as Alex and I laughed together, oblivious to the pain we were causing. Mike's heartbreak was a silent specter at our table, unseen but deeply felt. But Mike wasn't content with just observing. He took a step further, a step into a territory that was both invasive and desperate. He installed a GPS tracker in my car, a silent guardian of my betrayals, logging every visit to Alex, every secret rendezvous. The technology one relied on to keep my affair hidden was now being used against me, a poetic justice that didn't escape me even in my delusion. Each move Mike made was calculated, a strategy born of hurt and the need for undeniable proof. He was building a fortress of evidence, one that I would eventually be unable to deny. And yet, he waited, a storm-gathering force, for the moment to unleash the truth in a way that would leave no room for doubt, no possibility of escape. In the midst of it all, I remained blissfully ignorant, caught up in a fantasy that was slowly suffocating the reality of my marriage. The thrill of the affair blinded me to the destruction it was causing, leaving me unprepared for the fallout that was to come. The day I forgot Mike's birthday was the day I knew I had lost myself in this affair. It wasn't just a date on the calendar. It was a symbol of how far I had drifted from the woman I once was, the woman Mike married. The realization hit me like a cold wave, leaving me shivering with guilt. But by then, the damage was done, the wedge between us driven deeper with my every action. I remember scrambling to make excuses, to cover up my forgetfulness with lies about work stress and deadlines. But the hurt in Mike's eyes was unmistakable, a silent accusation that no words could soothe. I had prioritized my affair with Alex over my husband's birthday, a betrayal of our vows that couldn't be undone with a belated cake or a hastily bought gift. Meanwhile, Mike, unbeknownst to me, had been collecting evidence of my infidelity. The day he captured a photo of Alex and me together at the park was the day he sealed the fate of our marriage. That photo, a frozen moment of betrayal, was the undeniable proof he had been waiting for. As I lied about a work trip, planning a secret weekend getaway with Alex, Mike was at home, reflecting on the shattered pieces of our marriage. The loneliness and betrayal he felt were profound, a mixture of sadness and disillusionment that no one should ever have to endure. But life has a way of unraveling lies when we least expect it. I returned early from my trip with Alex, a sudden pang of conscience urging me to try and mend what I had broken. I told Mike I missed him, that I wanted to work on our marriage, but my words were hollow, a too late attempt to salvage the unsalvageable. It was then that Mike found the bracelet Alex had given me, hidden away like a shameful secret. The discovery of that bracelet in our bedroom was the silent scream that broke the camel's back. It was proof of my emotional departure from our marriage, a tangible symbol of my betrayal. Each event, each lie, and each secret had built up to this moment of reckoning. The facade I had maintained was crumbling, revealing the ugly truth of my actions. I was forced to confront the reality of what I had done, the pain I had caused to the man I once promised to love and cherish. In my quest for excitement, I had lost sight of what truly mattered. The realization came too late, and the cost was a marriage built on years of love and memories, now tainted by betrayal. The path I had chosen led me to this point of no return, where the consequences of my actions stared back at me, unforgiving and stark. The moment I stepped into the restaurant with Mike for our anniversary dinner, a knot of unease tightened in my stomach. It was supposed to be a celebration, a marker of our years together, but the weight of my secret affair with Alex loomed between us like an uninvited guest. I plastered on a smile, trying to ignore the growing sense of dread as we sat down to dinner. The evening started off normal enough, with Mike making small talk, asking about my day, my work. But there was a distant look in his eyes, a coldness I couldn't quite place. My attempts at conversation felt forced, hollow, as if we were both just going through the motions. Then, as the last plates were cleared away, the moment I had been dreading yet never truly anticipated arrived. Mike's demeanor changed. He became more serious, more somber. "We need to talk," he said, his voice steady but laced with an emotion I couldn't decipher. He began to lay out the evidence of my affair with Alex, one piece at a time. The photos, the emails, the secret meetings, and finally, the bracelet Alex had given me. Each item was a nail in the coffin of our marriage, a tangible proof of my betrayal. I felt cornered, trapped. My initial reaction was to deny everything, to cling to the web of lies I had woven so carefully. But as Mike continued, his pain and disappointment piercing through his words, my defenses crumbled. Tears streamed down my face as I confessed to the affair, the words tumbling out in a flood of guilt and shame. Then came the ultimatum that cut through the air like a knife. "You need to choose, Emily. It's him or me." His voice was firm, leaving no room for negotiation. The reality of what I had done, the gravity of my choices, hit me all at once. I was overwhelmed, torn between the life I had built with Mike and the escape Alex represented. "I don't know," I whispered, the truth of my indecision exposing the depth of my confusion and betrayal. Mike's response was swift and decisive. Without another word, he stood up, his chair scraping against the floor with a finality that echoed in my heart. "I'll be at my brother's. Take your time to decide," he said, his voice hollow. Then he walked out of the restaurant, out of our dinner, out of the life we had shared together, leaving me alone with the shattered pieces of our marriage. As I sat there, amidst the remnants of our anniversary dinner, the weight of my choices bore down on me. I realized then the full extent of the damage I had caused, not just to Mike, but to myself. The urgency of the moment, the need to make a decision, was overwhelming. But in the end, it was the realization that I might have already lost everything that hurt the most. The night Mike walked out of the restaurant, leaving me with a choice that shattered my world, I felt a desperation I'd never known. My first instinct was to reach out to Alex, to find solace in the one who had been the catalyst for this chaos. But as the phone rang unanswered, again and again, the reality of my isolation crashed down on me. Alex, who had been so present, so entwined in my days, suddenly became a ghost, unreachable and silent. The silence from his end screamed louder than any argument, leaving me to face the wreckage of my choices alone. In the quiet of our home, stripped of Mike's presence, the gravity of what I had done began to truly weigh on me. The walls echoed with the memory of laughter, arguments, and whispered secrets, now replaced by a deafening silence that pressed in on all sides. I was left alone, with the stark truth of my betrayal as my only company. That night, I didn't sleep. Instead, I walked through the empty rooms, each step a reminder of the love and life I had gambled away. The morning light didn't bring clarity, only the harsh reality of a new day. I was determined to face Mike, to try and mend the unbridgeable gap between us. My heart clung to a sliver of hope, believing in the power of apologies, of open conversations. But as I stood outside his brother's house, the truth delivered its cruel blow. Mike wasn't there. He hadn't been there since he left the restaurant. The finality of his absence, the physical distance, shattered any illusions I had harbored about reconciliation. Returning home, the sight that greeted me was a punch to the gut. Mike's belongings were gone, his side of the closet bare, his drawer empty. The note he left was concise, a few lines that severed our ties completely. "I can't continue with this marriage." The words were a closure I wasn't prepared for, a silent goodbye that echoed louder than any spoken words. The days that followed were a blur, a series of motions devoid of meaning. When the divorce papers arrived, they were a stark, legal confirmation of Mike's decision to end our marriage. The document, so clinical and impersonal, was the final nail in the coffin of our shared life. Signing them felt like signing away a part of my soul, an acknowledgement of my failure not just as a wife, but as a partner and friend to Mike. In the aftermath, the solitude was suffocating. The absence of Mike's presence, the silence of the phone that no longer rang with Alex's calls, left me in a limbo of my own making. The realization that I was the architect of my despair was a bitter pill to swallow. My attempts to escape the mundanity of my marriage had led me here, to an existence far lonelier than the one I had tried to flee. As I faced the empty days and nights, the full weight of my actions settled on my shoulders. The betrayal, the lies, and the hurt I had inflicted on Mike were irrevocable. The path to this moment was paved with choices, each one leading further away from the woman I once was, from the life and love I had taken for granted. In the end, the quest for something more had left me with nothing, a poignant lesson learned too late. From the moment I realized the finality of our separation, my days were consumed with a frantic, hollow urgency. I reached out to Mike, my messages a mix of apologies, pleas, and promises of change. But each call went unanswered, each message left unread. It was like shouting into the void, my voice echoing back at me, a reminder of the isolation my actions had wrought. The divorce proceedings were a blur, a swift and unyielding march towards the end of what we had built together. Mike was resolute, his decision final, leaving no room for the reconciliation I so desperately sought. The papers were signed with a trembling hand, the ink a testament to the destruction of our vows. In the wake of the divorce, I was left to navigate the debris of my life alone. The apartment we once shared felt cavernous, the silence a constant companion. I was haunted by the ghost of our life together, each corner a reminder of what had been and what I had squandered. Mike, in contrast, seemed to find a path forward with a speed that took my breath away. News of his relocation came to me through the grapevine, a bitter pill to swallow. He had moved to a new city, embracing a fresh start with a determination that I couldn't help but admire from afar. The realization of what my actions had cost me settled in with a weight that was suffocating. I understood, too late, the value of the love and life I had discarded in pursuit of something I had mistaken for happiness. The reflection in the mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, marked by regret and the consequences of her choices. It was on a crowded street, months later, that I saw Mike again. He was with someone new, a partner who looked at him with the same love and adoration I once had. The sight of them together, so clearly moved on, was a stark visual confirmation of the end of our chapter. The finality of it, the realization that he had found happiness beyond the wreckage of our marriage, was both a relief and a devastating blow. Living with the regret of my choices became my new normal. The understanding that I was the architect of my own downfall was a lesson learned in the hardest way. My actions had not only destroyed my marriage, but had also forced me to confront the parts of myself I had long ignored. Mike's resilience, his ability to rebuild and find happiness, was a stark contrast to my own struggle to move forward. His journey was a testament to the strength of the human spirit, an inspiring tale of overcoming betrayal and pain. In the end, my story serves as a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the pain it can inflict on those we love and ourselves. As I live in the shadow of my decisions, Mike's new beginnings offer a glimmer of hope, a proof that even in the aftermath of heartbreak, it is possible to rebuild. This video and all of its contents, including any opinions expressed by the narrator, are strictly for entertainment purposes only and is not intended in any way as a substitute for professional services and consultation from a licensed therapist, doctor, attorney, or other licensed professional service provider. Each person must make their own life decisions, and those decisions are theirs. Welcome back to Find Your Alpha. I'm back at you this week with another great story, and you can see the title right on your screen. Guy turns the tables on his cheating fiancée, then ghosts her. And I think you're really going to like this story because this guy handles things just about as well as you possibly could in a situation like this. So let's not waste any time, let's get right into the story. And he starts out, and he said this happened to me back in April of 2022. At the time I had been with my ex-fiancée for over 7 years, and we were scheduled to be married in June. At her request, we were going to have a big wedding, and her parents insisted on paying for everything. Life was sailing along for us, right up until the evening of Monday, April 18th. So what happened on that fateful evening? He says it was tax day, and I was already in a bad mood as I ended up owing over $1,100 to the IRS, but little did I know things were about to get a lot worse. That evening I was watching TV waiting for her to return from what I thought was a work function. Earlier that day, she had called me to ask if I would be all right with her going out to dinner with several of her coworkers who were visiting from another office. I said sure, no problem, and never gave it a second thought. While she was out that evening, she sent me a few texts giving me quick updates on what she was doing and asking me silly stuff. We texted back and forth, and she let me know she'd be home at 8:30. She actually didn't make it back until around 9:15, but again, I never gave it a second thought. After coming through the door, she walked directly over and kissed me. Normally, we greeted each other with a quick peck, but this kiss was passionate, like she wanted to get something going right there. As she was kissing me, I noticed a couple things. Now listen to this. He says first, her breath smelled like a combination of alcohol and toothpaste, and second, her skin smelled like she had just taken a shower. I was about to question her about this, but before I could get the words out, she started telling me about her day. She was talking fast and spewing a lot of information which had little relevance to the situation. She also wasn't making any eye contact with me. Again, here I noticed something was off, and I eventually interrupted her and asked if she was drunk. She looked at me surprised and said of course not. I only had 1 glass of wine. This too was odd as she didn't drink wine. When I questioned her, she said everyone at the table wanted to order a couple bottles of Merlot, so she just went along with it. I'm not sure why, but something deep inside was telling me she wasn't being forthcoming. Alarm bells were going off in my head, and I just had a gut feeling about it. Remember guys, always trust your gut. Sometimes it's wrong, but the majority of the time you're going to find it's right. I thought about confronting her right there, but I was really tired and I didn't want to get into a big argument at that hour, so I went in to take a shower. I think she sensed I was onto something as she had a worried look on her face as I walked away from her. While showering, I thought through everything with my mind, playing various scenarios of what might have happened. Though I wanted to believe otherwise, my gut kept telling me she did something. When I got out of the shower and finished drying off, she came in and started rubbing my chest and pressing her lower areas against mine. Next, she removed the towel I had wrapped around my waist and placed it on the floor. She then dropped to her knees and proceeded to give me blank, and you know what blank is. Now that may sound great to most guys, but let me tell you something. That is a huge red flag based on what he just described to us. He goes on, he says, I let her proceed even though I knew she was doing this to make up for something. She's one who doesn't like giving it, but loves receiving it. Also, when I blank, and I had to clean things up here because he gets a little descriptive, she normally spits it out, but this time she didn't and had a big smile on her face. So it's very clear what she's doing here, folks. She is love bombing him. She knows she did something terrible, and she's just doing this to distract him. That night while sleeping, I had to get up to take a piss, something I normally don't do. When I came back to get in bed, I saw her phone sitting on the nightstand beside her. I decided to take the opportunity to check it while she was sound asleep. To my surprise, all her recent calls and texts had been deleted except for one text that came in at 1:37 a.m. after she had fallen asleep. It was from someone she had set up in her contacts as Louisville office. The text read, "Just had a dream about you," with 2 heart emojis, followed by "Can't wait to see you again on Thursday," with 2 heart emojis. He says, while not a smoking gun, I knew what the message meant and I was devastated. I took a screenshot of the text and sent it to my phone, then deleted the screenshot and text I sent from her phone and placed it back on the nightstand. Needless to say, I got little sleep the rest of the night and had to do everything I could to prevent myself from waking her up and exploding on her. I wondered how she could do something like this to me after I had treated her so well for so long. You know, it is crazy and it is perplexing, but oftentimes you'll find the better you treat a woman, the more she trashes you. He goes on, he says, "In the morning, I acted like nothing was wrong, and we both went off to work. On my way, I called my older brother and told him what happened. He could tell I was upset, so we arranged to meet up after work to talk further. When we talked that evening, he told me to lay low and hold off on confronting her until I see what she does next. He said I needed more proof, and if I confronted her now, she'd just deny it and might cancel whatever she had planned for Thursday. We next discussed what I should do on Thursday after she tells me she's going out again. My brother suggested I follow her when she leaves work and said that he'd come with me. He and I continued talking there that night for hours, and I didn't get home until after 10. When I did, I gave her a quick peck and went in to take a shower. After the shower, I got into bed without telling her good night. When she realized I had done so, she came into the bedroom and sat on the bed beside me. She asked why I went to bed without saying good night. I told her I was really tired and had a headache. She then asked why I stayed out so long. I told her I was just hanging out with my brother, and we were catching up on stuff. She had a look of doubt on her face, but didn't press me further. I gave her another quick kiss, then turned over to go to sleep. The next day, my brother called me at lunch and said he just got off the phone with her. He said she pressed him for answers about what we were doing last night. He said he had to think on his feet and told her he was asking for my advice on a personal matter. He said she seemed to accept the explanation and then went on to tell him she was concerned because I had been acting weird recently. The OP says I wonder why. After hearing this, I told my brother I was going to really F with her head tonight. I said I was going to call her in a few hours and tell her I was going out for drinks after work with some coworkers. I told him I was only going to give her vague details, then stay out really late and see how she reacts. He told me that sounded good, but warned me to be careful as this might make her change her plans for Thursday. I told him I wouldn't go overboard, but I wanted to mess with her while I had the chance. And now we're at a point in this story where I want to remind you, if you like what you've heard so far, make sure you hit that like button and leave a comment. That will help get this video seen by people all over the world. Now let's go on with the story. Later that afternoon, I called her and told her I was going out. She asked me a bunch of questions, but I kept things vague. I told her we were just going out for a few drinks, but I didn't know where yet. I told her I'd text her when I got to the bar, but I never did. After work, I headed over to P.F. Chang's at the mall and had dinner. From there, I cut through the mall to get to the sports bar. While walking past Macy's, I decided to pop in and spritz myself with some women's perfume from a tester bottle. I did it to add a little more drama when I got home, but the shit was nasty and made me gag. I ended up not getting home that night until after 11 o'clock. When I did, the lights were all out and she was in bed. I went over and gave her a long kiss, making sure she got a good whiff of the perfume on my shirt. At first, she acted like she was sleeping, but when she smelled the perfume, she perked up and asked where I'd been. I told her I went out to dinner at P.F. Chang's with my coworkers, and then we all hung out at the sports bar for a while. This was all technically true, except no one was with me. She asked why I didn't text her, and I said I got busy and just forgot. She said, and then in a huff rolled over and turned her body away from me. I went back in and took a shower and then slipped into bed beside her. So you can see a lot of this story revolves around the shower. This is like the third shower this guy has taken as he's described this story. After a few minutes, she spooned up to me without saying a word. For some reason, when she did this, I just started laughing and couldn't control it. She looked up at me and asked what was so funny. I told her it was nothing. With that, she again turned her back to me and moved over to her side of the bed. So again, she was probably very huffy there the way he's describing this and moved away from him. When she did this, I had to do everything I could to prevent myself from bursting out laughing again. The next morning, things were frosty between us, and I didn't attempt to break the ice. Instead, I gave her a quick kiss as I was leaving and told her I'd see her tonight. She didn't return the kiss or say anything, telegraphing to me she was really pissed. So she's thinking in her mind, hey, this guy cheated on me last night. So watch what she does next. That afternoon, she texted me and stated she was going out again with those same coworkers and that she'd be home when she gets there. Obviously, she was still miffed at me for last night. So now not only was she cheating on me, she was doing it with an attitude which made me hate her even more. I texted her back saying, okay, have fun. She didn't even bother to text me back, or text me for the rest of the day for that matter. While I might seem cavalier about all this now, I was really torn up inside at the time. I couldn't believe the woman I loved and treated so well for 7 years could do this to me. After that, I called my brother, and we set our plan in motion. We both knocked off work a little early, so we could stake out her office and follow her when she left. He swung by my apartment and drove me over to her office. We parked just down from her car where we could clearly see her vehicle without being noticed. She came out just after 5, got in her car, and began driving north. My brother tailed her from a distance, and we almost lost her at one of the red lights, but thankfully we didn't. She eventually turned into the Hilton Garden Inn and backed into a parking spot. We drove past the Hilton and turned into the lot of the adjacent hotel, which sits on a bluff above the Hilton. From there, we had a clear view of her car and the front doors of the hotel, so we could watch her walk in. She sat in her car for a good 20 minutes until a white Toyota Corolla pulled up and parked a few spaces down from her. A big guy got out of the car wearing a polo shirt and dress slacks and started removing items from his backseat. So Chad is now on the scene. She then got out of her car and went over to join him. When she did, he leaned over and they shared a passionate kiss as he continued gathering his belongings. Though we were a distance away, my brother and I were able to snap a number of pictures, including several of them kissing and walking hand in hand. Seeing her do that really broke me, and I started yelling and crying. Thankfully, my brother was there to calm me down, as I don't know how I would have handled things had he not been. I probably would have run down the hill and tackled the guy on the asphalt or something, which wouldn't have been smart because he described this guy as a big guy, and I'll tell you what, a cheater like his fiancée, she's not worth it. After we watched them disappear into the lobby, my brother drove me back to my apartment to get some of my stuff. We loaded most of my possessions into my car and put some larger pieces in his pickup. When we had everything loaded, I told him I'd meet him back at his place in a little bit. He asked where I was going, and I told him I was going over to tell her parents about everything. Now this is where I think he did something brilliant. When I got to their place, I knocked on the door. Her father answered and asked why I knocked, and just didn't walk in as I normally would do. I told him I had something important to talk to them about, and asked if his wife was there. He asked me if something had happened to his daughter. I told him she was fine, but something had happened that I needed to tell them about. He gave me a concerned look but called out to his wife, and she joined us in the dining room. As soon as we were all seated at the table, I told them everything without holding back. I informed them the wedding wasn't happening, and they should plan accordingly. They were in complete shock, and her father asked me to repeat what I just said. I again told them what she had done, and then showed them the pictures. They were crushed and in disbelief. I informed them that she was with her lover right now at the Hilton Garden Inn, and they might be able to catch her there if they left now. They were both devastated and profusely apologized to me. I told them it wasn't their fault, and that I appreciated their kindness over the years. Her mother was crying and kept saying she couldn't believe it, while her father just shook his head. I thanked them both, gave them a hug, and left. They walked me out to my car and kept saying how sorry they were. After that, I drove over to my brother's place and crashed there. I'll admit that was one really tough night for me. I was filled with a mix of sadness along with a hefty dose of betrayal and sheer anger. The following day, I called off work and headed off to the state park to take a hike and do some fishing to clear my mind. Sometime around mid-morning, I started getting calls and text messages from her which I didn't answer. In her first voicemail, she was crying and telling me how sorry she was, saying she loved me and only me and wants to be my wife. The OP says LMFAO. In her next message, she informed me she just resigned from her job and blocked the guy on everything so we can start over, and the OP says, yeah, right. Isn't it amazing how a lot of these cheaters just think, oh, all I got to do is block the guy and cut him off and then apologize to my boyfriend, or in this case her fiancé, and everything's going to be okay. We're going to go back to normal. No, it doesn't work like that. She begged me to call her, saying she would do anything to save our relationship and give me everything if I'd give her another chance. I didn't respond to any of her ridiculous messages, and her phony pleas made me hate her even more. A few hours later, my brother called and told me he had just gotten off the phone with her. He said she was inconsolable, and he could barely make out what she was saying. She told him she was desperate to find me and asked if I was staying with him. He lied and told her I wasn't, informing her he knew where I was, but he couldn't tell her. To make a long story short, she tried constantly to contact me for weeks, but I completely ignored all her attempts, including those by her family. I was done and wanted nothing more to do with any of them, and I think that's really smart. Even though he said he had a good relationship with her parents, you got to remember those parents, even though they may be empathetic with you, they are eventually going to side with her, so it's best just to cut ties with all of them. She even showed up at my brother's place on 3 different occasions. Thankfully, neither of us were there at the time, but we saw her on his Ring camera. She also showed up at my job a few times, but the receptionist had instructions for me to tell her I wasn't there. So again, he's totally ghosted her. After about 3 months or so of this nonsense, she eventually stopped trying, and I've never seen or spoken to her since, though I have gotten updates about her from a guy who's married to one of her cousins. He and I are in a golf league together and have become buds. He's kept me abreast of everything that's happened in her life since we split. According to him, after I told her parents, they did go to the hotel to confront her. He said they tried calling her, but she wouldn't answer, so they parked and waited for her to come out. From what he told me, she still has PTSD from that confrontation. He said she's still completely ashamed and embarrassed by everything. She recently took a new job and moved an hour away to try to rebuild her life. According to him, the guy she cheated with is single and wanted to get into a relationship with her, but she wanted nothing to do with him after we broke up. How does that make any sense? The OP says she was willing to risk everything to take a few joy rides on his D, but wants nothing to do with him now that she's a free agent. That's crazy, he says, and it is crazy when you think about it, but how many of these women do this in these stories? You know, they're willing to cheat on their boyfriend or their husband, or in this case the fiancé, but once the fiancé acts like a man and cuts them off, now they don't want anything to do with their affair partner, and they want their fiancé or their husband or their boyfriend. It's crazy, and guess what, guys, you'll never understand it, because there's no rational explanation for it. He told me she still goes around telling people that one day we will get back together, but that's never going to happen. She's a very attractive woman, so I'm sure at some point she'll snag another fool like me when she's ready. Yeah, if she's attractive, she's not going to have any problem getting another guy, and she'll probably end up cheating on that guy just as well. I'm so glad I found out about this before I married her. Thank you, Lord. After going through this ordeal, I'll never get married, and my brother feels the same way. He's dealt with some shit too, and we both feel it's not worth it, and that's the end of his story. And I agree with these guys, because in today's world with women like they are, and considering today's marriage laws, I have to agree with these brothers. And overall, like I said up front, I think this guy handled the situation just about as well as you possibly could. Now let's take a look at what I think are some of the morals of the story. First, cheating is a predisposition and can happen at any time given the right setup. He was with this woman for 7 years before she cheated on him. Now, most people would look at that and say, well, she was a loyal person with him for 7 years. No. Here was the situation. She was always a cheater. She had that deep inside of her, but she never had the opportunity. Like I've said in other videos, when they get the opportunity, a cheater will cheat. A person who doesn't have a predisposition to cheat will not cheat even if they're given the opportunity. So remember that. Next, love bombing is one of the biggest red flags. However, it is often overlooked, and women know this, guys. They know they can use their bodies and get away with a lot, and unfortunately many of them do. Next, completely ghosting a cheater is best if you can do it. Now, the reason I say if you can do it, because in some cases you know people may have children together, and in those situations you can't completely ghost them because you have to communicate about the kids, but in all other situations where there's no kids involved, ghosting is the way to go. Next, having a trusted confidant is a huge plus. This guy had his brother, and you can see his brother gave him a lot of good advice. He was a sounding board for him. He also went with him when they staked her out, and that's invaluable. Now, a lot of people don't have that, and in those cases you got to rely on yourself, and what you need to do in those cases is settle down. Don't do anything out of emotion or anger. Think it through. Think of all the pros and cons before you act. And finally, A cheater isn't entitled to receive closure, nor are you obligated to give it to them. Sometimes out of desperation, you'll see these cheaters, and they'll say, "Oh, please, just let me meet with you one more time to apologize and get closure." No, you don't owe that to her, so just move on. Just ghost her and go on with your life. And those are my thoughts, and now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story, and how do you think this guy handled it? Would you have done what he did, or would you have done something completely different? Tell us about it in the comments. Also, be sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to this channel, and I will